Welcome to the Virtual Strategic Solutions Virtual Reality Simulation System. Accessing Legacy Dataset. Files loaded, simulation ready. A town on the Flatwoods River, known for tales of its namesake monster. Entryway signs reading Home of the Green Monster can be found at the town's entryways. The only current residents of Flatwoods are Heather Ellis and her dog, Chloe, who are attempting to rebuild the responders using the equipment the original group left behind. After the war, the responders settled here in an attempt to help survivors. The local Reverend, Delbert Winters, born and raised in Flatwoods, offered to volunteer as well as provided his church as a location for their outpost. The group began to offer training, shelter, food, water, and a purpose to the survivors of the Great War. Flatwoods is a small town with two main roadways, Church Street and Bridge Road. Heading south from the Overseer's camp, the road leads past the Green Country Lodge and a house where the body of Willie May is found. Heading under the Green Country Bridge, the church and tavern come into view. Bridge Road is a left-hand turn from here, and to the right is the house in which Sophie Yates' remains are found. Down Bridge Road, both Colonel and Jeremiah Ward are found deceased in houses to the left. Vesta's Housewares is located on the right. Heading west down State Route 86B leads to the Vault-Tec Agricultural Research Center across a bridge over the Flatwoods River. Continuing on Church Street leads to the Meeting Hall, a yellow house with a tinker's workbench and a weapons workbench, and the Responder Command Center at the church and the Flatwoods Tavern. The tavern has 2 floors with a large cooking area established in the adjacent parking lot, where Reverend Delbert Winters taught residents how to cook after he encountered survivors eating raw rat carcass behind a dumpster. The automated training kiosks are set against the northeastern wall on the first floor, offering training as a responder volunteer for anyone willing to join the group or passing through town. On the south side of town is a Red Rocket gas station that has a stash box within it and a tinker's workbench on the outside rear. A few feral ghouls linger around the Red Rocket. South of the Flatwoods Tavern are several more locations, including the house where Nurse Scott's body is found, the community garden, and a tent campsite. Several harvestable items can be found in the garden, including silt beans and mute fruit. Delbert was born and raised in Flatwoods. During his life, Delbert joined the army, which garnered significant life experiences through new environments. He eventually led the Flatwoods Church, and when the bombs fell, the Reverend witnessed what he perceived to be the end of the world. Surviving this, Delbert had a crisis of faith, reflecting on his past, ranging from fighting in the war to charity work, as he survived on a day-to-day basis. When he discovered survivors eating raw meat and becoming sick, he took this as a sign from God, a task for him to help keep post-war survivors fed and healthy. When the responders settled in Flatwoods, Delbert lent his church to them so they could establish an outpost, and volunteered with the group, devoting himself to cooking for the survivors, running the book club, and nightly survivors' guilt meetings. His work with the responders gave meaning to his life despite his own doubts and struggle with faith. He set up Brahmin pastures, provided lessons and knowledge to those he could, and commented on the changing creatures and flora he observed in the region. When Sophie Yates tried to leave the town and join the raiders, Winters tried to stop her, but Sophie ended his life. Delbert's remains are found in his home in Flatwoods, but his work serves as a legacy. His recipes are found throughout the region. Current inhabitants such as Yasmin Chowdhury remark that Delbert's work inspired them to learn more about Appalachian cooking traditions. Sophie Yates was a volunteer candidate with the responders and had been a student in Delbert's volunteer training class since January 20th, 2096. She was assigned to live at 10 Church Road. However, despite being a volunteer candidate for them, she did not believe in the responders' mission. Sophie may not have been sound of mind after the bombs fell, going by her note to Tabitha and her survivor's story, in which she claimed she lived off cat food in a super-duper mart near her parents' corpses. She lamented that no one came to rescue her and advises listeners against helping others. She believed it was better to drop the sick off in the mountains and was stopped by Delbert Winters for trying. She implied that she had a part in his death, remarking that he would not be teaching. Prior to the Great War, Willie Mae was a resident of Flatwoods. After retiring, she had planned to simply watch her programs and entertain her grandchildren. But the Great War changed all of that. Just before the war, there was news of tremors in the mines where her husband Frank worked, and he never came home. Since the war, Willie Mae spent her time listening to music and reading old newspaper articles. A month prior to the war, Willie Mae won the Watauga Times Atomic Lottery after 20 years of participation, netting herself a 10-year supply of Blamco mac and cheese, Salisbury steak and Nuka-Cola. However, this supply only lasted 8 years, and she sought out the responders for aid after hearing their radio broadcasts. Scott Shepard was a nurse before the Great War who volunteered up with the responders after the bombs fell, providing his services in exchange for supplies and housing. He was a paranoid person, as detailed in his survivor story, believing that 9 days, 19 hours before the war, he was attacked by aliens, and that they orchestrated the war and controlled who survived, who died, and everything in between. He also had theories on other topics, mainly political and paranormal, which he shared with the other survivors. Colonel can be heard telling his story in the holotape Survivor Story. He was a troublemaker and prankster before the Great War, and felt guilty for the war and the mutations, believing his father's words that bad things would not have happened had he behaved. He missed his father, who disappeared after the bombs dropped. Colonel left a note for his father in the Flatwoods meeting hall, saying he would be waiting in the church with cereal, games, and a sleeping bag for each of them. The responders database reveals he became a responder as a volunteer when he was 13 and was tasked with being the caregiver for the other children. He eventually became a full responder approximately 5 years later. He mainly helped find people in Appalachia and get them to safety, along with teaching them how to survive. He also came to comprehend why his father left him behind, which drove him to make sure that he would take care of the younger children in the care of the responders. By the time that Vault 76 opens and the Vault dwellers are released into Appalachia, Colonel has passed away. His body can be found on the front porch of a red house in Flatwoods, south of the overpass, next to the body of a raider. A pre-war facility established to experiment with crop automation and fertilization, the Agricultural Center was one of the major landmarks in the small town of Flatwoods. The fleet of Mr. Farmhands, customized Mr. Handy robots, would automatically take care of crops, fertilizing them, planting seeds, and collecting the harvest with barely any need for human oversight. While the Great War put the facility offline, it was reactivated and restored to partial operation by McFadden in a bid to aid starving survivors. McFadden had no technical expertise and was unable to achieve much beyond simply reactivating the robots with help from the responders. He continued his work, but his lack of skill culminated in the farmhands going rogue and the Protectron Handy overseers turning the robots loose on anyone who breached the facility's perimeter. The Vault-Tec Agricultural Research Center consists of the main building with surrounding sheds and greenhouses that no longer house any plant life. The main building can be accessed either via doors in the greenhouses behind the building, the main front door, or a door on the roof of the building. The roof can be accessed from the outside via a set of fire stairs. It has 3 floors including a basement. The first floor contains locker rooms, bathrooms, a few hydroponics labs, one contains a chemistry station, and a reception area. One of the overseer's journal holotapes can be found on the reception desk. The second floor contains multiple offices, one of which contains McFadden's terminal and a locked wall safe. One of the offices on this floor is locked and contains a bedroll and laser gun. There is also a meeting room off the main atrium.